Digital 410 Media proudly presents the What's the Scuttlebutt podcast with your hosts, Don Abernathy, Jeff Copsetta, and Dennis Blocker.
Welcome, everybody, to another episode of the What's the Scuttlebutt podcast, your favorite World War II-based podcast. We are back after a short hiatus, and we got the holiday weekend coming up soon, so we're going to get this episode out a little early. Dennis is working the ranch. He'll be here soon, but Jeff is here, and so is a return guest. I think you might be second in line, maybe third in line of the most returns of a guest. I'll have to go and check the archives. Mr. Scott Gibson, who is the most proud Canadian I've talked to today. Not only has his shirt on, he's made a custom AI Facebook profile page of him in a Mountie uniform, riding a moose, drinking syrup, and watching an episode of Shoresy. It's the craziest thing I've seen. But Scott, how you been, friend?
Fantastic. I mean, to be able to do this on Canada Day, and salute all my American friends. This is the only day I don't get abused as a Canadian by my American friends. They let it go. They don't. There's no Canada jokes. There's no you're a commie and fascist and all your tag. Trudeau and
to be fair, it's not you, it's Trudeau, but yeah, there's some interesting things going up there political wise. But yeah, we're happy to have you back. And
thank you,
Jeff.
My pleasure.
I'll let you go ahead and kind of give the lowdown on what this episode is going to be, because you and Scott have been keeping in tight correspondence. You write each other manually letters like the old days all the time, and you came up with an idea after he came back from a very cool trip. And so why don't you go ahead and bring it on down.
Yeah, well, I thought, every social media platform and all the folks that we follow and the organizations that we support and everything, this past month has all been about D-Day. And we didn't want to certainly fall short on that, although we didn't necessarily do a whole lot on the anniversary. But I thought, why not hear from somebody, who was just there? And has been, become a great friend of What's the Scuttlebutt and a good friend of mine. And so Scott's not only just recently returned from Normandy, but also has another really unique trip that I'd like to for him to talk about as well, coming up in September. We hope to make sure that happens as well, and do what we can to make sure that comes to fruition. So let's talk Normandy first, Scott.
What do you want to know?
Everything. We weren't there. We all suffered real bad FOMO, except for Jeff was in Greece, so he wasn't as bad as on the FOMO, but we had real bad FOMO over here. We were fearing of missing out of all the great activities over there.
Absolutely. Well, I'd like to maybe talk about the organization first that you pair with the wonderful organization there, and what they do, and what it's like for you when you go over there, and some of the experiences, and how important it is that you belong to that organization or help with that organization.
Man, hard to pare it all down, but we were there. We only were able to have one World War II veteran with us. So Reed Clanton, who wasn't able to make it. And the Canadian vet that we found in Phoenix, he wasn't able to make it for health reasons. They're both fine. But a big part of their trip, when people go on it, is you're with the veterans the entire time, all the tour, all the events and everything like that. So this year, Dennis Bolt was with us, 98, turning 99. He was artillery guy who landed Utah Beach about D-Day +6. He'd never been back. He'd been to Europe, but he'd never been back to Normandy. And I got picked up from Mike Tarr, who's him and Jeff basically run Wishes for Heroes, more so Walk Among Heroes, but Wish as well. And I got to drive in from Paris to Normandy with Dennis. And this just gives you a sort of a whole overview of the trip. But you've never met someone more excited, more grateful in your life for him to be there. It just, everything was a blessing to him, and his gratitude, and he had more energy than you could believe. So I got to be with him pretty much every day of the trip, every event, every ceremony, be right with him. And what an honor that is. The amount of love that was shown to this man, the amount of things that were said to him, I mean, it might sound corny in a way, but it's like I felt all of that through him because of all the amazing things that people said to him. I mean, we were at lunch one day, and this German lady, anywhere we'd go, people would, if you're sitting down anywhere, they'd come up, shake his hand, get a picture, get an autograph. They were like rock stars. They were like the Beatles. Must have been like they were swarmed there. But, this German lady comes up, leaving the restaurant, and thanks him for 80 years of freedom, from the Hitler and everything. Another Austrian fellow who had a similar story was a gentleman whose grandfather, not that Dennis was there, but his grandfather was liberated by the Americans from Auschwitz. So all these little stories, and that's the great thing about Walk Among Heroes and bringing the veterans and being able to do that is it's so little time, so precious time, but to be there in Normandy with them, to do these trips with them, man, I like, how did I get so lucky, or how did I get so blessed to be able to do this with those guys?
Was it kind of surreal?
Absolutely. So, and you had mentioned earlier that this is now Walk Among Heroes. It's like their 10th anniversary or so, or 10 years in doing this.
So Jeff started Wishes for Our Heroes.
Okay.
With the mandate of helping active duty military in distress, financial, et cetera, whatever. He literally started in San Antonio with a cowboy boot on the side of the road, taking donations. It's coming up on their 15th anniversary in October 5th. Oh. Last year, on the day of their gala in San Antonio, they raised, where you were at, they raised $700,000. That was in one day. So this year, his goal is to raise $1 million. Now, they have some big donors that, contribute maybe half of that, I would say, or almost half. But all the other money is just raised from people being at that silent auction and the auction, being at that gala. So they take that money and it all goes out to active duty military. And then 3 years ago, they started Walk Among Heroes to bring these veterans back. So we had, like I say, we only had Dennis this year, but we had a couple other veterans that were brought there that were with us for a few days, and they're going to go every year as long as there's a veteran that wants to go, and hopefully beyond that as well.
Was it kind of surreal not only being in Normandy on the 80th anniversary, but obviously with it being such a big anniversary? You had a lot of military vehicles just driving here and there because people are going to see different areas. You got people in uniforms. Was it kind of surreal not only to see the battlefields or see the towns that we've read so much about or seen in movies and in TV shows, plus just out of the peripheral seeing like a Jeep driving or a deuce and a half or just people in uniform just walking in your periphery, just being there?
Yeah, it's almost like you're in a movie about D-Day. With the biggest jump day was June 9th. The 82nd Airborne, not that everyone jumped, the 82nd brought an entire brigade, like close to 3,000. There was a live beach assault that the Marines were part of, Special Forces were a part of, Navy SEALs, Army, everything, you name it. And being around all the reenactors, all the ceremonies, all the people there, but just realizing like how small of an area this was, and what happened on that day, which weather-wise, the day before they couldn't do it because it was so bad, and a couple days after it never would have happened. And it's very surreal. Like you look at it when you're there, and all the bunkers you visit and everything you understand, and all these little battles that happen, which today, and you look at these roads and causeways and bridges and you go, man, like, with Lafayette Bridge, I think at the 82nd Airborne, 300 were killed. And I forget how many wounded, but it's just this little tiny bridge. And because every part of the other area was flooded, it was just these guys, it's like when you're a kid playing with tanks and army guys, and it's like that. I mean, forgive me for that, but just these fights and battles that they had, and you're like, how did anybody ever do this?
Did you get kind of like a sense of like, what a huge bottleneck? I mean, we've seen all the pictures of all the ships, and now, as you're saying, the area is smaller than you would think. It's almost like you have all these people, all these ships, and they're just funneling into this one little area. So no wonder the casualties were so high.
Yeah, and to land, in one day, 130,000, all that equipment, everything related to being able to take Cherbourg, which took longer than they anticipated, and the Germans blew up the whole port, so it took them longer to get all those supplies and everything like that. All that shipped in, all that mechanism,
running the oil lines under the water across the channel, all that. It's the logistics alone. I mean, let's take out the beach landing, just the logistics to get the equipment, the technology, the oil, everything needed to feed this war. You'll never see anything like it again.
And how they dropped mannequins with parachutes, further north, and
the Ghost Army. Yep.
The Ghost Army. We went. There was a bunker that we visited. It was Helen Patton, that General Patton's granddaughter, who very much associated with Walk Among Heroes, and she has a guest house at Lafayette Bridge. So that's where we go to see the jumps. And I think so. She brought us there, and it's this bunker near Utah Beach, and this French guy, like it's like you walk into this bunker. It was really, really big. It's right next to a battery of, they weren't 88s, I think 105s, but how these people get to land there and find these things. And he basically won it in an auction, but it wasn't because he paid the most money. I don't exactly know how he got it, but this bunker, you walk in there and it's like you walk in and it was 1944.
Wow.
So all the memorabilia, you went into the back part of it, and there's a radio room. So it was as if the Germans were there, and you could hear they're playing an audio of Germans talking on the day. You get to the front, and the pair of binoculars that they had on a mount there were original. So this is what these guys looked through and saw on D-Day. And all you see, right, is the channel and everything. And I'm going, what must have that guy thought?
Correct me if I'm wrong, Jeff, but there's one of those cats was like, 15? I think he wrote a book or did an interview at one point. One of the kids who was manning one of the MG-42s is 15, 16 years old, and just stuck on guard duty for all these months. And all of a sudden he opens his eyes. It's like, oh shit, here we go. That had to be so terrifying.
Yeah.
Especially when
there was conscripted Poles and younger folks and older folks that were at Normandy, of course, because Hitler thought that was a diversion, right? Mm-hmm. For something like more than a week and a half. But I think the interesting point that you brought up, Scott, is just thinking about today, the logistics of the event today and how much that depended on weather. Can only imagine. I mean, we freak out if if we're planning a wedding, right? And it's like a big weekend or a big birthday party, and oh my God, the weather and all these logistics that we're talking about, but weather was still a factor. But it just, I mean, my gosh, what it took to get us there. And could you imagine? I mean, it did, right? We can imagine it, socked in, and all of a sudden the weather opens up, and it just, man, just all those things having to come together, just one combustible point for that thing to be a success it's still mind blowing that it was pulled off even as well as it was.
But like, and General Roosevelt, who was there, Omaha Beach, they apparently didn't land where he was supposed to on Omaha, and they actually wanted him to keep moving like further, I'll say east. And he just said, fuck it, I'm landing here, and this is where the war starts. But had they not done that, the Germans would have been able to get down that part of the causeway, that whatever road, right? With their tanks, and how much that would have changed it. Or the highest casualty rate was Omaha Beach. The second was Juneau, where the Canadians were. We don't spend much time. Obviously, it's all American tour and all the American beaches, but just visited Juneau this year, but didn't get to either of the British beaches. But that's 60 miles. The whole 60 miles.
Yeah.
We're landing everybody and point to Hawk. How these guys climbed up those cliffs at Point to Hawk. You're just it's really hard to comprehend all of it. And again, to your point, Jeff, Don, you couldn't do that today.
I have a question for you, because we never get the opportunity really, and it never occurs to me to ask, but you're the perfect person to ask because you are from another country, but yet you're in the same hemisphere, and our culture is so similar. But growing up in Canada, when you would watch like your equivalent of History Channel, or when you watch historical documents about World War II in Canada, did you guys have a lot of Canadian heavy history, or were you watching the same, American produced stuff we were, learning about the Americans' contribution and less about the Canadian contribution? Was there a lot of productions growing up of talking about the Canadian stuff? Because we rarely see it here unless you're digging deep on some old History Channel stuff. Yeah,
no, I mean, certainly in school, and obviously your relatives, like my grandparents, having that. Now I imagine there's just so little of it, and they don't. One of the guys that was in Normandy with me, and I was in this small. It was Saint Marie de Mont, in some store. You get a coffee, and they had all books and memorabilia and stuff. And I found a patch. It was the first special services, right? So had USA in the top, Canada down the bottom. That was the first special service brigade, and a wonderful movie. I mean, not necessarily militarily accurate, but called The Devil's Brigade, that William Holden starred in. And to know, just to find a little piece like that about Canada, or when you go to Juneau and people, I wear my shirt, and there were, we went on the beach. I grabbed some sand for Don Williams. He was a Navy vet that was supposed to come with us on this trip, and he couldn't make it. So got him sand, put it in a bottle, his flag. And these reenactors come walking over, and I said, "Hey, do you want a picture with a Canadian on a Canadian beach?" And they were like, "Yeah, okay." And I walk over, and this one dude just looks at me and he goes, "This is what I get for being in the Pacific." But they go, they just do that and stop. And I'm like, "Yep, yes, yep." Andy Haldane's? Yeah. And I'm like, I'm a Canadian on Juneau Beach with Spanish reenactors pretending to be Canadians. How wonderful is that?
Well known for being in a show that took place in the Pacific.
That's cool.
And this guy remembers me from an American HBO series. Like that's incredible. That's just so wonderful.
That's
I
cool.
think at that point, that's a great segue to for us to introduce Dennis Block, or Dennis. Meet Scott Gibson,
How's it going,
Andy
sir?
Haldane.
How's it going, sir? It's an honor to meet you.
No, the honor is mine. Thank you so much.
Appreciate you coming on, sir. Sorry, I was tardy. Scott, I was wondering, what's the premiere book for Juno Beach? Um, do you happen to know?
Oh man. Um,
I don't recall because it's been so long, but does Cornelius Ryan, does he hit on it pretty good in The Longest Day, or
yeah, I think so. I mean, there's not a lot, like the best Canadian Pierre Burton, his book about Vimy, of course, which is the First World War, and then there was one written. I think his name is Broadbent, Ed Broadbent, the 6 War Years, and it's not specifically about Juno. It's just Canada's entire involvement back home and the war. Really, like great narrative, talking with everybody and anybody about their experience being in the war. But there's just so little about Juno, and funny bringing some of the Americans over there that were on the trip with us and volunteers. A few of them said, "This is the nicest beach we've been to." But it's the beach town, and it's got the fishing village to it and everything like that. But I mean that whole area just got hammered to crap. So most of the buildings there are new. St. Mary Glees, Carrington, all these other places. There's a lot of these churches that survive and everything, but at Juneau they were all wiped out. So
has there been a concerted effort to get the stories from the guys through the years? We've got several archives, and it seems like every little museum has got their own little effort at preserving history, and the high schoolers, they get extra credit for interviewing World War II vets. And has there been any effort like that to really try and get the guys' stories before they passed?
not here. No, no, very much British Commonwealth. You know, I don't know what it is entirely. It's I mean, to me, really disappointing. I did a short film years ago called The 13th Mission, and it's one of the Canadians who awarded the Victoria Cross posthumously. He was a mid gunner in a Lancaster, and the Lanc got shot down over France on the 13th Mission. He all the five in the front were able to bail out. A pilot put it on some kind of a glide. Basically, they got all out, and Andrew Minarski was about to bail at the back door, but the tail gunner couldn't get out of his turret because the oil for the hydraulics was all shot up, so he couldn't pivot out of there. So Andy walked through there through the fire and took an axe, and he was trying to turn the guy's turret, get him out of there, and couldn't. So the tail gunner just finally waves him off. Minarski gets to the door, he salutes him, parachutes out. He was found by the French resistance, but he was so burnt up, he died. The plane actually landed, hit ground, and the tail gunner's just in the back doing Hail Marys, but one of the wings clipped some trees, and that spun the plane, and it pivoted his turret, and he was able to bail out backwards onto the ground. And then the plane went, however far, and blew up. The resistance found him. He made it back to England.
Oh my God.
5 or 6 months later, and he went to a pub in London. And who was at this pub but the five got the engineer, the pilot, the co-pilot.
My.
And he thought Minarski lived, and Minarski didn't. But I did this short, and it's supposed to be at the Juneau Beach Center, but I called someone up there and I said, I want to visit with some people here. And do you know if this video is still playing there? And the person had no idea. And
Man,
it's just the same because there's so many great stories similar to everything in the U.S. and British, and we just don't celebrate. There's nothing for D-Day here. Our Remembrance Day, Veterans Day is a bigger deal now, but it's still, I don't know. I mean, people I think the reason for remembering is obviously to honor, but also to say this can very much happen again.
For sure.
And if you think that it's never going to happen again, you haven't studied history and what happens. So
absolutely,
that's why I feel so much a part of it, and bringing these stories and being there in Normandy and going to Peleliu in September. It's just keep telling these stories,
To answer your question, Dennis, it looks like there's a couple of good ones. One of them's by a Mark Zulik called Holding Juneau Beach. It's the Canada's heroic defense of D-Day beaches from June 7th to June 12th. And then another
Holding
book.
Juneau Beach. I'm going to order it right now.
And then there's another one called Valor on Juneau Beach. There's quite a few of them, but those two look like they get some of the bigger write-ups on them. But yeah, Valor Juneau Beach. I was trying to find the first one I told you about Holding was from 2006. I was trying to find the copyright on Valor of Juneau Beach just because the cover kind of has that old school feel to it. It looks like it may be from the 50s or 60s. Oh, no, that's 2005. So it looks like in the early 2000s, looks like there are some Juneau Beach books published. Looks like maybe there was some interest sprung around that time, because it looks like in early 2000, a handful of them came out.
Well,
I mean,
I'll tell you what.
They got,
sorry.
no, I was just going to say, I mean, they got pretty far, and we're only kind of stopped because, they couldn't reinforce but once they got past Juneau, I mean, it was 80% casualties on the first wave.
My gosh, man!
In the first hour, it was 80%.
Jeez. That just never gets the limelight.
Yeah.
Man.
No, and there was a story I saw on one of the news channels here about the Royal Newfoundland Regiment in the First World War. You never hear about this, but they're part of the Battle of the Somme, and Newfoundland was its own country then, right? They weren't part of Canada until the mid-late 50s, I think. But this regiment had 900, and their casualty rate on this one day was 800.
Jeez.
Yeah.
Not all dead, but
Jeez.
and they knew what they were walking into in terms of this slaughter. And you just think of all those landings and these guys jumping out of, my one experience in training in Australia, and in the boat we were in, it didn't open up to the front. You jumped off the sides. But I just thought, man, how could anybody operate war? I mean, you jump out of there, these guys get slaughtered.
Yeah.
And they knew it was going to happen. Everyone knew it was going to happen. And man,
to that point, during the 75th anniversary of Tarawa, I was lucky enough to participate in a reenactment in Alabama, right on the western side of the Florida Panhandle, and we had a landing craft. We were supposed to have two, but because of the hurricane a few weeks before, we couldn't get one of them. But to that point, we came up, the ramp came down. Obviously, it's a reenactment. No one's shooting at us. There's no explosions. And we still had people just going down the ramp, slipping, sliding, tumbling, going in ass over tea kettle with all their gear, their machine guns and all that. And that's just a bunch of guys coming off of a boat that we rode for 15 minutes. We weren't out there spinning in circles for 3.5 hours, getting cramps, and then having people shooting and things exploding. And even just that, just a leisurely ride in full uniform carrying the gear, people were slipping and busting their ass coming down off those things. So it's tremendous how many people made it off in one piece. And real quick, just to get the numbers out there, the 3rd Canadian Division, Juneau Beach, casualty, nearly 1,000 Canadian casualties, 340 of those 1,000 were killed alongside with another 243 British casualties. So 340 Canadians killed, and the rest out of that 1,000 were wounded.
Man.
Well, and yeah, Scott, I was going to tell you too that I'm really proud. I can't really get this to show without glare on it, but this is a rock you sent me from Juno Beach. It says Juno Beach 2022 on it, and I'm really proud to own it because people have sent me rocks and sands from battlefields all over the place, and I've got several samples from both Omaha and Utah. But I guarantee this is probably the only piece of Juno that will ever probably come my way, and I thank you for it. But not only because again it was a gift from you, it was very thoughtful, but because it is what it is, right? I mean, it's kind of one of those overshadowed pieces of history that how many people here have a piece of Juno, and I love talking about it, and of course the wood from Brerecourt Manor, and that's a big deal as well, but. And as time's gone by here on What's the Scuttlebutt, it seems like we never are going to run out of material. But it's been such for me doing this a few years now. Been learning so much about these little niches in history, and Dennis is a great one at being able to capture it in his short stories and what he publishes, and to learn about some of the stuff. It's just fascinating because I think we all are, within 10 years of each other in age. So I think we all kind of grew up with basically the same war movies that we kind of go back to, and the big stories. But especially for America's involvement, those 45 months, that's a long time. It's not just, Pearl Harbor and Battle of the Bulge and Iwo Jima. And then when we take a deeper dive to, no American should stand here and say we won World War II, because it could not have been done without the Allies. So for us here in the U.S., I think it's interesting to learn about Australia and New Zealand and Britain and Canada, and see what they really, really went through. I mean, you look at just what it took to build the Burma Road, for example. All these things, all these countries coming together to make this happen, and there's just so many of these little things, these little stories that are just waiting to be told and need to be told.
I was, I mean, that's more sort of growing up, or not my acting career or anything, just everything from the U.S., because we're absolutely bombarded with TV, sports, everything from America. You get it in that part of the war. I remember as a kid going, shit, yeah, the Canadians, and then I posted the other day about me with, they put Walk Among Heroes posted me on Juno Beach, and so you see some of the comments, and then someone had said, I didn't reply to or anything, just taking a shot at America, like, you didn't get into the war in Europe until 44, and you're just going like, how? Yeah, okay, but how ignorant are you? Do you not know of this other war that was going on in the Pacific? And just people's ignorance. So when I went to Juneau with Americans that had never been there, because it just the way it is, and they had some, those reenactors, but they had some school kids, like a band, and then they had some pipers and everything. It was very, very Canadian / British, and they were so appreciative of it. Just, oh shit, we didn't. There's this other beach, and this happened, and you're Canadian, and it's like, yeah, such an opportunity for them to visit and understand, because it was fucking hell for them, big time.
I know we covered it the first time you were on, but for our new listeners, and because of Masters of the Air recently came out, and Jeff and Dennis and I discussed this for those new actors who got hired on to perform in that feature. And we kind of talked before also, we all know how Band of Brothers, how a lot of those cast members, a lot of them have taken up the mantle, and so have you.
For sure.
When you were going through the audition process for the Pacific, did it occur to you that there was a high potential that this would have a life-altering course for you, that there may be a an opportunity where you kind of go down the Gary Sinise route, which I think it's safe to say, you know, that you're probably, I would assume you're more active in more historical based things post that show than prior. Did it ever occur to you that your life would be affected in such a way just by doing a simple project like that?
No. No. I mean, not, you know, being a part of, you know, because I auditioned for bands, that didn't happen. And I was old enough, I looked young enough to be able to portray Andy in the Pacific. So, you know, that's a different kind of blessing. But it's one of those things as an actor, as a guy, you're like, I got to do my Western. I got to get the war movie. That kind of thing is, you know, it plays on you when you're in your 20s and everything like that. And of course, working for Spielberg and Hanks and HBO, at the time, it was so daunting. I really didn't know how to handle it. And in terms of filming it, to this day, it's still, I'm like, I don't know how that all just came about, how we did it and pulled that all off, and how I did what I did. I think you were thinking a little bit more about your career, and then everything was Band of Brothers.
Mm-hmm.
Every year in Normandy and everything, and I get it. So the Pacific side of it really hasn't had anything, and until myself and the other four actors went to Pearl Harbor last year, we'd never experienced anything where people were just, oh shit, the Pacific. And being there in Pearl, it was pretty, it's weird that anyone would recognize you. You know, I mean, you could be really self-indulgent, egotistical, whatever, but similarly in Normandy, I would be with Dennis everywhere, and the cemetery, Omaha Beach. The first day we took him to Omaha Beach, Big Red One, and some guys from the First Division were there, and they were having this meeting on the beach. And we had Dennis and wanted to get some pictures and stuff. So this major comes up and he was talking to Jeff or somebody, and then he talked a bit to Dennis. And then he turned and he looked at me and he did that, holy shit. And he goes, I don't know your name, but I know who you are. And I'm like, yeah. And he told me when he goes, the scene with you and Sledge and the watch, you know, what time's your watch say? 0950. And yeah, I know. Yeah, I remember that. And he goes, I watched the Pacific before I got deployed to Afghanistan. And I believe he was a company commander there. And he goes, I would say that to my men all the time.
Huh. Wow.
It was, you know, and you're there with the guy who's 100 who landed there 80 years ago, and someone's telling you that, and their reflection, and it's all a reflection of Andy. It's all a reflection of the Marines and everything they did. And I always take that with me. You know, whenever anyone says that, it's like, I'm so grateful. Thank you. You know, I appreciate everything you say, but for someone, particularly in the military, to say that, right? It's just like, wow. And then I saw him again at Point to Hawk, and he was with, I think he was, the guy was a colonel, I think. But anyway, they're just like taking pictures, and like I went to a gala there, and there were Marines at this AVA gala, and so I see the guy in the Marine uniform, and I went up to him and I said, dude, I never see Marines at these things, you know? You're not here in Normandy. And this guy looks at me, he's like, holy fuck. Fucking hell, dang. I'm like, well, yeah, okay, whatever. Yeah, thank you. But it's like, I never see Marines here. And he was so like, oh man, this is awesome. He goes, I was just watching this. and the 4-star was there, Marine General, and this guy's telling me, he's like, I really enjoyed the Pacific. I mean, that was great, because the Marines are like, fuck yeah, there's not enough about us and all this stuff. To experience any of that in Normandy, or because I did that role, is just it's all so new to me. It's all such a blessing, but all the other things I do and trips and everything is just to, like, yeah, we got to, never forget. And my life and all of this stuff never would have happened if it wasn't for Andy Haldane. Never, nothing. So
I think that scene's probably one that I quote the most whenever, particularly when I'm at a tactical event where we're like literally walking around the woods for hours on end. Everybody be standing around. Why stand when you can sit? I said, why sit when you can lay down? Why lay down when you can sleep? And I just pull up a patch of grass and just close my eyes until we get ready to move out again. But yep, that's probably one of those scenes I probably quote the most at an event.
Hey, Scott. I've been in situations through my career in emergency medicine and with the fire department, and I've met a lot of men in my life that meant a lot to me, that I would have followed them to hell and back, and in some cases did, covered in blood and whatnot. And there are thousands of people that could have portrayed Haldane, but you really did it in a way that gripped, and that's why these military men are speaking to you, because you put something in it that touched these grizzled men, and it reminded them exactly of men in their lives and men that they wanted to be. And for you to have inhibited that, you should not take that away from yourself, because there are very few people, I would wager, that could have pulled that off. And you really tapped into it. And I'm telling you, these warriors are coming to you because you did it. You did it. And you honored the man that you were portraying. And I'm just so proud of you, man. That's just epic.
Yeah, no, that means the world, really. I had the privilege of reading Andy's letters. These were back to his college. I was able to glean that, I think, more so than anything else I read about him or was told about him. Even talking to his nephew, Steve Moore, that I'm friends with, because I was so intimidated. He said, how do I portray this guy? But everything I thought of when I was filming was just about the men under him, which is everything that he thought of. And, he could be strict, but he was fair, but he was so compassionate. In so many letters that I read about him. And these letters, you think this guy would be like a history teacher, English teacher, but then these stories of him, nothing that was covered in the series, certainly not at Cape Gloucester where he got the Silver Star. And the guy, I think this guy was his runner, James Anderson. He was interviewed by Garrett Shatrosky, who's written a biography about Andy. And they got a bit lost on this patrol and in this attack, and they ended up on this hill. And this guy, James, he looks down the line and he said, there's Andy with his K-bar in one hand and 45 in the other. And he put his K-bar through Japanese soldier, and he goes, he threw him off his knife like he was throwing a football. But then he's everything he writes was just so compassionate. Not like I was encouraged in some ways when we were filming in the beginning to be a little bit more, let's go, and this and that. And I just thought, no, that's not him, and that's not him at Peleliu. That's not. I mean, if you see pictures of Andy from 1942 to 44, he looks about 50 years older. and he went completely gray when he was there. So everything I thought of was just how did he think about it, his men, and that's all I can say to pulling it off. Other than I somehow inhabited the guy. I really don't know. I really don't know. But that's
Well,
how
I think
that's
the
how I did.
fact that you have through the years you've continued to uh, do service in that name, and to honor that fella and the guys that were with him. It's just another thing that speaks of your character. And others might have just said, "Oh, it was a good role," and then moved on, and that'd have been fine. But something really tapped into you, and that's again speaks to your character, and it's pretty awesome that when you see. Um, I think it probably has a lot to do with, uh, you know, your heart and who you are, and you pulled it off, and because you can't fake it when you get grizzled men to come up to you like that,
Yeah,
yeah,
so
you can't
many.
fake it. Yeah, that's pretty awesome. Um,
So
well,
it's so many, like particularly in Normandy, that's extremely humbling to be with someone who was there, and then someone else is like, "Hey, you're that." Like I don't know. It's so I don't even really know how to describe it. My grandfather on my mom's side was in the Navy, and uh, he captained 9 different ships in the Second World War and sunk 2 subs. And
wow.
um, I can't relive any of that story or be a part of it. So to just be in Normandy, or we're going to Peleliu, but to honor anybody and everybody, but particularly obviously Andy. When I finished that, I remember telling myself, if this is the last big thing I ever do as an actor, I'm okay with that.
I'm glad you said that because I've been sitting on a question, and I want to get to your upcoming trip to Peleliu. But no, perfect segue. Jeff's worked on a couple of projects. I did some background work on a couple episodes of the remake of The Right Stuff, but it's a weird question unless you've been on a movie set or TV show set. Do you remember, because they shoot things out of sequence? Do you remember what scene you wrapped when they said, "That's it, that's a wrap for Scott Gibson," and how you felt? Because for people who don't know, when an actor or character, principal actor, when they're done filming their parts of a series, the director said, "That's it, that's a wrap for so and so." And so, do you remember what the last scene you recorded, and when they called "That's a wrap for Scott Gibson," how you felt?
It was episode 6, Tony Toe directing, and during the daytime, I had gone back down to base camp, and I didn't get wrapped. And I thought, okay, and it felt weird. And there was a kid he was part of the armory, this young kid, and he had he was a big fan and everything like that. And the 45 I carried, I never fired it. So I went down to the armory, and he was just so gung-ho. He's like, "You have to fire this. You have to fire this. I don't care." I'm like, "Okay, yeah, that's like fantastic." Because I fired my carbine once in the series. That was it. I never fired the 45. And he was just like, he was so happy I fired the 45. And then I got brought back up to set. And James Badge Dale was filming something. And I got back up there. I don't know if I was even shooting anything earlier, but I got back up to set. And I just remember sort of feeling numb. And Tony gave me the rap, and Badge was there, and we just hugged and said nothing. Absolutely nothing. But he goes, I think I'll be finished soon, so wait for me for the ride home, because the guy who was doing the webbing, he didn't love everybody. This Australian dude, a few of the actors he wasn't in love with, but he gave us each a bottle of wine.
Wow.
So he goes, and then Badge is like, "Hey, dude, I think I'll be done in an hour. We'll catch a ride home." But I felt really completely just numb, man. It was weird. It was weird leaving there. That was 7 months.
Wow, man.
7 months, and I was never Scott Gibson to any of the backgrounds, any Dale Dye, his cadre, my guys. I was the skipper all the time. I'd go to the can and background guys would salute me.
Mm-hmm.
So you're just living that for that long, and then the ending was just, maybe it was appropriate that way to end things off like that, because it just felt really, really empty.
Wow.
Yeah, there's an interesting feeling, and me doing background work, I didn't feel as much, but just being on the set for when Jeff worked on the Walking Point, and just me being there for a day and a half and seeing how the cast acted with each other. And when I was lucky enough to do the almost 3-hour long episode, and then having some of the actors message me months later saying, I still listen to those episodes because it reminds me of that night. And you and Jeff could talk this better than I can, but from being an outsider looking in, it's almost like here you have a room full of adults that are almost experiencing that feeling. Remember when you're like 13 and 14, you guys went off to summer camp for like 2 weeks, and you made all these best friends, you had the best time of your life, and then it was time to go home. Your parents are coming, and you kind of had that feeling it was almost you broke up with somebody. It kind of seemed like here, you have a room full of adults almost having that same experience, that same feeling of, oh shit, I just had the best friends I've had for months, and now we're all going back home. And so it was like the last day of summer camp feeling. At least that's the way I kind of took it in, watching the way everybody was treating one another.
That the core of us that are close, and the guys that I know, we can't speak to war or would never. Okay, yeah, we know what that's like, or any part of it, but we really lived that experience. That it was so intense, and we wanted to get it right so badly, and so invested in it for so long of a time. And that's why we're all still so close.
And that makes sense, because I think Tom Hanks once said that the hardest role he ever played, the most emotionally draining role he ever did, was Saving Private Ryan, because here you are for 12 hours a day pretending to see people, especially if you're a method actor, you're really getting into it. You're really crying tears. You're putting yourself psychologically in that position so that you can express those feelings. And 12, 13 hours a day for months on end. And, I could see how that could be emotionally draining if you're really getting into that scene or that role or that character or that scenario for days and days on end.
Unless it was a shit ton of, I just would never want to do that again. It sounds weird, but I couldn't imagine going through that again. That it's give me, if it's 500, I don't care what the money is, just no, even military stuff, I get auditions now and I'm going, Jesus, I don't.
To me, that me, that answers the question, did you put it all out there? Yeah, truly you did. If you're looking at it sure. I don't want to go through that, you truly put it all
Absolutely.
out there. And that's all people can ask for.
Yeah, that comes across too. Definitely comes across. I felt the same way about anything that I write. Like if I don't get goosebumps when I read what I wrote to somebody, it's not it. I haven't got it yet. Like even though I looked at that manuscript friggin' 10 times, if I haven't put it all in there, I remember doing The Heart of Hell, my grandpa's gunboat book, The Heart of Hell, and when I wrote scenes where Lawrence Bozarth was dying. This is this real kid and his shipmates. I had tears just streaming down my cheeks as I'm typing this manuscript and snotting and everything. and it was just hitting hard. But then I knew if it hits me hard like that, it's going to hit the readers, and that's what I want. I want them to be in the footsteps of my grandfather at Iwo Jima. So absolutely, it takes everything out of you. And if it doesn't, you didn't do your job, and you didn't put everything into it, and you didn't honor the material. And I think that Band of Brothers, the Pacific, Masters of the Air, one thing that's very evident is everything rises and falls on leadership. And from the top down, it starts. And those at the top put in just as much attention to detail, and it just trickles down, and they make darn sure everybody that comes in after them is just as much into that attention to detail, and it comes across. And it's pretty awesome to see.
Hey, Dale Dye and his cadre, but Dale was beside me the whole time and just everything, because I was the captain and he knew obviously all about Haldane. But filming episode 7, and because Andy goes gray, it was weird. I was wearing the helmet the whole time, but he went completely gray. So the hair team would have to put gray in my hair. So you do all the makeup and everything, and then I had to go through that. And then it was the day we were going up into the hills in Ep7, and it just took a long time. And I'm chatting with the lady who's putting the gray in my hair, but I knew it was like, oh shit, I'm gonna be in trouble. And I made it up to where they were shooting, and I went to Dale and I said, "Oh, Skipper, apologies, hair and makeup." And he was like, "Yeah, fuck." He made a comment or two, and then he goes, "Well, I played your part. So this is what you're going to do. You're leading the company up into the hills. They say action, and you're moving weapons, and and he's doing all this fucking thing." And I'm just looking at him going, I'm not doing that at all. There's no fucking way. I'm like, that's not how I'm playing Andy. So he said all that. I'm like, yes, sir. Yes, sir. Yes, sir. And then one of the Marines that was part of the cadre was the first sergeant, or portraying the first sergeant in 3-5. And he was beside me. And I just looked at him and I said, "Hey, man, when they say action, I'm going to ask you if the company's ready. You just nod or say yes, whatever. And then I'm going to tell you to move them out." And he goes, "Okay." So that's what we did. And we filmed it and we shot a bunch of times. And then at the end of it, Dale comes walking up to me, and I thought, okay, I don't know, he's going to give me a blast or something. But he's sort of the real deal. Yeah. And he comes up to me and he said, "Skipper, every officer has his own way of leading, and I respect that." Shook my hand. Was like, damn, okay, maybe I got this right. Maybe I got this right. And that was 7, because I didn't do that much in 5, but that was the beginning of 7. It's like, okay,
that's cool.
Maybe I got it right.
So give us a breakdown on the upcoming trip and the organization you're doing that with.
Peleliu, September for the 80th.
Wow.
That's right on the corner. It's getting closer.
Man.
Yeah.
How awesome.
World War II, Beyond the Call. Tracy Hunter, her charity. Everything 100% veteran driven in terms of bringing them back to the battlefield. So she was bringing, or is bringing, Al Chatwin, Navy vet who's stationed in Guam, bringing him back to Guam because he's never been back and he wanted to go. And I said to her, "Hey, what do you think about," this is when we were in Hawaii, and I said, "What do you think about Peleliu?" So we found another Navy vet who landed Orange Beach 2 on Peleliu and ended up being Beachmaster there. Wow. That wasn't his role, but the other guy got killed. He really wants to go. Unfortunately, health-wise, his doctor's like, I don't think he can fly, do that long trip. So we're still going to bring Al, but we're going to be there for the 80th and connect with the Marines in terms of they're dedicating a museum there. They finished the airfield there. A plane just landed there last week for the first time, 80 years.
Whoa.
Yeah, I heard they're refurbishing
That's
it.
pretty cool.
I want to. I hope they'll allow me to run across the airfield.
That would be so cool.
Better strap on a GoPro.
Right? Because RV, I mean, that's the thing. RV Bergen, and befriending him a couple of years before he died. Met him at the the premiere in Hollywood, and then a couple times in Dallas. And I never, I'm not, when I'm with these guys, I just like to shoot the shit and not, hey, what happened on this day or the war or anything like that. But I asked him, what was your hardest day in the war? And he said unequivocally, crossing that airfield.
Wow.
Was the toughest day because he goes, it's this bright, beautiful day, clear skies, and guys were running, guys were walking, guys were stopped, they were getting bombarded. And he said, it was probably just a matter of minutes, but it felt like hours.
Oh, I can imagine.
Crossing that airfield, because it was just, obviously like turkey shoot. But he said that was the hardest day. And to hear him he gave me props about how I portrayed Andy, which just meant the absolute world to know. And I think for him, even watching and that stuff, probably, he would look at any of us maybe as like he's seen Andy from that many years ago. And like at his funeral, I went to his funeral, and he had the theme song Honor when at the end of his funeral. It was that theme song it meant so much to him.
Wow.
that story was told, and he was so proud, and such a beautiful guy. Just absolutely incredible to meet someone like that and to know him. But when I first met him at the premiere, and I was introduced to him by Martin McCann, who was portraying Bergen, who's an Irishman, young Irish actor, and he's like, yeah, RV, this is Scott. He's portraying the skipper. And RV just looked at me from my feet to the top of my head, and he goes, well, we'll see how you measure up. Which was perfect.
Yeah.
Well, one of the standout,
he was there with Phillips.
One of the standout things they did in the Pacific, and it really comes through in that episode, is the impact that life on those atolls had on the Marines. And in that particular episode, just the desperation around not having enough water, that really came through. And so it's one thing to think, running across that airport on a Wednesday after, waking up, good night's sleep, and you're fully hydrated, that would be hard enough. But to, in that oppressive heat, completely dehydrated in the condition those men were in, just makes it all that much harder.
The amount of people that died there, Japanese, American, Indigenous. I was going to go after we finished filming, but I was just so gassed that I thought I can't do it and appreciate it. And I always, in the back of my mind, was like, I gotta go there. I gotta go. And this opportunity came up, which is incredible. And to be able to bring Al to Guam, to raise money for other veterans to go to Pearl Harbor, but just to be there on the 80th, because it ain't Normandy. It's not an easy place to get to. And to do this documentary, to be with other Marines, to just say, hey, this was a really fucking shitty thing that never should have happened. But, we got to honor it, because there were so many of those, like Tarawa, right? How many people know about Tarawa? Saipan, any of that stuff, right? Like these were horrible battles. So.
Yeah, for sure. Scott, the one, as a guy who had his own battles with some very severe PTSD from all that crap, but one of the scenes that really resonates with me, and I tell everybody about it every time, is after Peleliu, when Snafu and Sledge come off the ship, and there's those Red Cross girls there, and they're handing them lemonade, and that that vision of him, of Sledge looking at those girls, and he's trying to comprehend a world where something so pretty and clean and proper and nice and beautiful, how he can't comprehend how he's looking at them, and he doesn't say a single word. It's all in his face, and he pulls it off, and he does it in such a way that even the lieutenant looks at him and says, "Move along," and he looks up and he gives him this look like, "I will stab you with a K-bar."
Yeah.
And the lieutenant backs down, and he's like, "Oh, yeah, these are actual warriors I'm looking at here." And that was just, man, that scene just, man, they captured it, and that just really spoke to me.
They did, and you know, Henry, he told me about his father, his last day passing, and his mom whispering to him, you know, "You're going to see your parents, and you're going to see Akak." Right?
Oh.
Like how that, and how much he did, and man, it just so, any of that's like it's just so moving. But
Yeah.
you know, we got Pelelu. There's one of the guys there, Don Graves, who he wants to go back to Ewo for the 80th of that. Hopefully we'll be able to get him over there. But Pearl Harbor, if any of you guys can go this year, it's going to be a great celebration. And we got bringing 5 veterans, 4 of them from Texas.
Wow.
To Pearl for that week, and honor these dudes. And I wish there were more things like that. I'm trying to get involved a little bit more in Canada. There's just really not that much, unfortunately. But Canada Day, I, you know, put the shirt on and.
Yeah, you want to get to Ewo as soon as you can. We had a historian and author in front of the show, Jared Frederick, on not too long ago, and he just recently came back from Ewo, and he said he kind of got the impression that once the last Pacific vet is no longer with us, that Japan's looking forward to like just shutting down access to the island. Like he was saying, you know, in the near future, as an American tourist, you may not be able to go there. So like, you probably want to get those trips booked as soon as you can. If anybody listening has that on their bucket list, because it may not be accessible in after a few more years.
I don't even know that it is now. If it, like, I don't, because one of this tour group we're associated with for Pelelu, they talk about Ewo, but you can't go unless you're an American citizen.
Yeah, and even
and it's only 1 day a year.
Yeah, apparently.
Oh, geez.
Before we wrap it up, another weird post-production kind of question. Was there like for you in your daily life, just going about your career, because obviously you film these shows and sometimes they take 6 months, sometimes they take a year and a half between post-production, finalization, and release date. Was it a clear like line of demarcation in your just current going through life, and then all of a sudden when the show came out, all of a sudden like you could feel it in your life, or was it a slow trickle, like a couple months after the show came out, you know, you started feeling it in your daily life as far as maybe being recognized or interviews, or not? Obviously you got to do the media tour and all that to promote the show, but just in your regular going ons, because I'm sure, you know, you feel it, and especially, you know, 6 months ago it started streaming on YouTube again. I mean, Netflix again. How long before but from the time you guys stopped filming to your daily life that, oh, this show's turning into something?
It had a lot of, it was bigger. It took a year and a half for it to come out. They had some internal issues in terms of how it all looked and everything, and some, I think I spoke maybe the last time, or the powers that be had some big fights about it. So there was all this buzz. So if you're in Hollywood as an actor, everyone was like, oh, you were in the Pacific, and they had this big buildup. Then when it aired, I think it was kind of similar to Band in a way, because Band aired, right? September 11th happened.
Mm-hmm.
So it never really got that big push until it went onto DVD and everything else. It aired, we did the premiere, did all the shows, and then it really kind of just started going down. And it's only recently, I would say in the last couple of years, maybe partially, Netflix, that was recently, but it just came into the lexicon. It came into, people started viewing it, and it just built and continues to. I get messages from people around the world about it that have seen it. So it seems like it's bigger now than after it came out. It really kind of fell off a bit.
Well, you guys
Scott,
also
what
have...
happened. What happened was there's these YouTube channels, and they react to videos, and they get these Patreon subscribers, and that gives them license to tell the reactor what to look at, and they say watch Band of Brothers and watch the Pacific, and each time they watch that video is watched 200,000 times by their individual subscribers, and then those are watched by people like myself who are interested to see how watching other people react to you guys on, and so that's what happens, is that it just spiraled because these reactionists started watching. It's wild.
No, it's such a big part. I mean, there was a girl from South Korea, that came on our trip. She's 19, and she had emailed me like a year ago, but just, she's an artist, and she's drawn a lot of pictures of guys from the Pacific and Band and everything like that. But just stuff that I said and stuff that was written for me in the episodes. And she's like, that saved my life.
Whoa.
Like, it just resonated so much with me, what he said to his men, that because I was going through such a hard time, and the whole Korean, her parents are rich, and be a doctor, be a lawyer, or whatever, and she's being an artist, and she said that resonated so much with me that I feel like it saved my life.
Whoa, man.
And I've had other stuff like that too, and I'm going, but for years never heard anything about it. And we get together as friends, and go to a guy's wedding, or we had our 10-year anniversary, and just in the and exactly to your point, just in the last few years, people watch it and go, holy shit, that's a great series.
That's really good series. Exactly.
Well,
yeah.
the benefit of Netflix now is because the other strange thing to think about, out of the 3 series, is you were the last one that was on HBO. And so since it was exclusively on HBO, there's a big portion of the pop, just demographic in general, just people in general, who didn't see it because they didn't have HBO. And now it's on Netflix, it has a more wider audience. And so a lot of people...
Yeah.
So even
It's
people
great,
who were of age when it came out, who didn't see it because they didn't have HBO, now they're discovering it for the first time.
Yeah. And so many other people, hopefully with the Guam and Peleliu trip.
Yeah, that's going to be amazing.
Gonna blow that up.
That's pretty awesome.
As much as we can.
We'll have to have you back on when you come back, so you can give us the first-hand account like you did with the D-Day.
Yeah, I can't. I mean, I can't even imagine just landing there, being there.
Yeah.
Scott, where can people find you on the old internet? Instagram, Facebook. Where can people find you if they're looking for you?
This is Scott Gibson. That's my Instagram handle. Just Scott Gibson on Facebook. But I post a lot of the stuff, the trips and everything on the Instagram, and they'll be able to follow us on Pelelu on there, and World War II Beyond the Call, that charity. We're, like I say, we're able to do this trip because of the donations we have through the charity, to be able to go to Pelelu and also bring 5 of these guys from Texas to Pearl for that commemoration. So
Wow.
And as always, to find links and more information on Scott and the trips, head over to WTSPWorldWar2.com. That's WTSPWWII.com, and you'll see his lovely face on the homepage. Click on it, and it'll take you to the page for this episode, and you can find all the links. And speaking of Patreon and YouTube, while you're on WTSPWorldWar2.com, click on the Patreon link, sign up, subscribe. It only costs you $1 a month. We're going to do another giveaway probably here in a month or two. Got to think of something cool to give away. And if you're on YouTube, look for D410 Media, and you can watch all of our content there as well. And we haven't done this in a while. We want to hear from you guys. Email us at mailcall@WTSPWorldWar2.com. Comments, questions, suggestions of topics you want us to cover. Maybe you know a particular part of World War II that we haven't covered, and you think you can come on and hold it down for 30 minutes. We'll happily have you on. Send us an email, mailcall@WTSPWorldWar2.com. For Jeff, Dennis Blocker, and Scott Gibson and myself, we want to thank you all, and we will talk to you all next week.
This has been a Digital 410 production.